The year was 1470. The mountains of Thessaly slept beneath a sky the color of faded ash. Snow dusted the pine trees, and the air hung heavy with the kind of silence that only comes before something breaks. Then, across the valley, a single bell began to ring. Its voice was old, cracked, tired. It trembled through the morning mist like a dying breath. That bell had called the faithful to prayer every dawn for 140 years. But on this morning, its echo sounded different, like the cry of something ancient realizing it was about to be silenced forever. Inside the convent of St. Catherine, 23 women knelt in prayer. The floor beneath them was cold stone. The air smelled of smoke, wax, and winter. Their lips moved in unison, whispering words they had spoken every morning for years. Words that once tasted like devotion, but now burned like ash. Their voices trembled, but they did not stop. Outside the convent walls, the horizon glowed red, not with sunrise, but with fire. Ottoman banners, hundreds of them, fluttered like veins of blood across the mountainside. The empire was coming. It did not march. It flowed, a living flood of armor and flame that devoured everything in its path. Sister Elani, the abbess, clutched a silver crucifix so tightly her knuckles turned white. The cross had survived 3 generations of women before her, through plague, famine, and war. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Forgive us, Lord. We are not afraid to die. We are only afraid to be forgotten." She looked around at her sisters. Some prayed with trembling lips. Others simply stared at the chapel's wooden doors as though expecting them to break at any moment. The bell outside tolled one final time, then fell silent. 17 years earlier, in 1453, Constantinople, the greatest city of Christendom, had fallen. 53 days of thunder and smoke, of cannons that shook the earth and screams that would echo for centuries. When the last wall crumbled, the great cathedral of Hagia Sophia, the pride of the Byzantine world, stood desecrated. Its crosses were torn down, its bells melted into nothing. The faces of saints, painted over for centuries, were buried beneath plaster. And where choirs had once sung hymns of hope, the call to prayer now echoed, claiming the space as its own. Sultan Mehmed II, known to the world as the Conqueror, stood beneath its domes and looked up. He understood something most rulers never did. You do not destroy a people by killing them. You destroy them by erasing what they remember. Every church that still rang its bell was a scar on his empire. Every convent that whispered prayers in Latin was an act of defiance. And so he made a decision, one that would outlive the men who carried it out. If they would not convert, they would vanish. Not through slaughter. Slaughter breeds martyrs. Martyrs create legends, and legends are immortal. No, the Sultan's plan was far more elegant. He would not create martyrs, he would create silence. Far from Constantinople, high among the cliffs of Thessaly, stood the convent of St. Catherine, small, humble, built of stone and faith. The sisters there had no soldiers, no walls strong enough to withstand an army. Their lives were made of routine, prayer at dawn, healing herbs at noon, bread at dusk. They believed the world could still be kind. They believed faith was protection. Sister Elani had been abbess for 12 years. Before that, she had tended to the sick in a village that the plague swallowed whole. When she arrived at the convent, she did not come to escape the world, but to make sense of its cruelty. Sister Magdalena, the youngest, was only 19. Her family had been slaughtered in a raid. The convent had taken her in. Her hands still bore the calluses of her father's farm, her eyes the quiet grief of someone who had already buried her childhood. Sister Theodora, 70 years old and half-blind, had seen empires rise and fall. "If death finds me here," she would say with a trembling smile, "tell it to sit. I'll make it tea." The first cannonball struck just after dawn. It hit the bell tower. Stone erupted into the air, smoke filling the courtyard. The bell, that voice of faith that had called them for generations, shattered mid-swing. The sound was apocalyptic. Iron clanged, shards of stone rained down on the herb garden where the sisters grew medicine for the poor. The nuns screamed, but through the chaos, one voice rose, steady, trembling, defiant. Sister Elani stood in the middle of the chapel, crucifix raised high, and sang, "Kyrie Ellison," she cried, "Lord, have mercy." One by one, the others joined her. 23 voices rose together, echoing through smoke and fire. They sang louder than the cannons, louder than the fear in their throats. The air trembled with their faith. By midday, the gates burst open. Ottoman soldiers poured into the courtyard, not with swords drawn, but with scrolls and ledgers. They moved like accountants, not conquerors. Because for them, this wasn't battle, it was business. A translator stepped forward, a Greek man whose eyes would not meet theirs. His voice cracked as he read from the decree. By order of Sultan Mehmed, ruler of the Sublime Empire, all subjects of conquered lands must submit to the faith of Islam. Those who convert shall live. Those who refuse will be dealt with as rebels. Sister Elani stepped forward, crucifix glinting in the broken light. "Tell your sultan," she said, her voice calm, "that we already belong to a king, and he does not share his throne." The translator froze. The soldiers looked at their commander, Hassan Pasha, a tall man with cold eyes and the faintest trace of a smile. He had seen this before. He had broken faith before, and he would do it again. That night, the sisters were locked in their chapel. No food, no water, no light. Outside, soldiers laughed and drank. Inside, the darkness seemed to breathe. 2 of the younger nuns began to cry softly. But Sister Magdalena whispered, her voice shaking, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Her words hung in the air. Another joined her, then another. Soon the chapel echoed with prayer. Their voices were hoarse, their lips cracked, but the sound was alive, stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. What the Ottomans thought was torture, the sisters recognized as devotion. They had spent their lives preparing to suffer, fasting, kneeling, waiting in silence for God's answer. Now that silence was their weapon. On the 4th day, the doors opened. A servant entered carrying bread and water. He set it down without a word and left. The smell filled the air, warm, intoxicating, cruel. The younger sisters looked at Elani, their eyes begging for permission. She said nothing for a long time, then she whispered, "Then we fast." By the next sunrise, their lips were bleeding. Their hands shook, but they did not eat. Hassan Pasha watched from the courtyard, arms folded, his expression unreadable. In a letter to the Sultan, he once wrote, "Faith burns brightest just before it dies." He would test that theory here. The next morning, he entered the chapel. His boots echoed across the stone floor. "You are not criminals," he said quietly. "You are not enemies. You are simply mistaken. The Sultan offers mercy. Convert, and you will live. Refuse, and you will walk to Constantinople. Perhaps His Majesty will be moved by your faith." He paused. "The road is long. The weak do not survive it." At dawn, 23 women left the convent, their hands bound, their feet bare, their eyes fixed ahead. The valley that had once echoed with hymns now echoed with chains. They walked for 7 days. The sun burned them. The dust clung to their skin. They slept on dirt, drank from puddles, prayed under the stars. By the 2nd day, Sister Irene collapsed. Her body simply gave up. Magdalena and another carried her for miles until their own legs gave out. When they stopped, Irene was gone. They buried her with their hands, no tools, no ceremony, just earth and whispered prayers. By the time they reached the port of Volos, only 18 were left. Their silence had changed. It wasn't the silence of defeat, it was the silence of surrender to something greater. They were loaded onto an Ottoman galley, a warship with benches of iron and chains that never stopped creaking. The sea was merciless. Waves crashed over them, salt burning their lips and wounds. Many vomited until there was nothing left. But at night, when the sea quieted, Sister Magdalena whispered psalms into the dark. Her voice, thin as a candle flame, carried across the deck. The other prisoners, Greeks, Armenians, Serbs, listened. For a moment, the sea itself seemed to still. When the ship entered the Bosphorus 12 days later, the skyline of Constantinople rose like a dream carved in gold and stone. The city of the world's desire, beautiful and terrible all at once. The sisters were marched through its streets, crowds gathered to stare, Christian nuns in chains, a spectacle even in an empire built on conquest. Some wept, some turned away. They were led not into the palace halls, but beneath them, down cold, spiraling steps, into tunnels that smelled of mold and memory. There, in the dark, they disappeared. Centuries later, in 2011, archaeologists restoring the lower tunnels of Topkapi Palace found a sealed chamber behind a false wall. Inside, the air was thick and stale. On the walls, dozens of small crosses carved into stone. Some neat, some desperate, some clawed so deep they seemed to bleed. And beneath them, 4 Latin words, Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness, wax residue was found on the floor, mixed with herbs, not from Ottoman candles, but from convent-made ones. These women had lived here, worked as silent servants by day, and at night gathered to pray. They had no priest, no altar, no Bible, only memory. They sang hymns in whispers so soft, the stone itself seemed to listen. They broke stolen bread and drank water from palace wells. They carved their prayers into the wall, one scratch at a time, knowing no one would ever see it. In one corner, a carving of a bird. Next to it, 23 marks, 11 complete, the rest trailing off into nothing. And beside the bird, 2 faint Greek words. We endure. That mark belonged to Sister Magdalena. Ottoman records from 1482 mention a cleansing of the palace servants. No details, no names, no graves, only one word written neatly in the margins of a ledger. Disposed. The women of St. Catherine vanished from history, but the stone remembered. For centuries, palace servants whispered that on certain nights, when the halls were silent, if you listened closely beneath the floors, you could hear faint singing. Women's voices in Latin carried by cold air. Historians dismissed it as superstition, but the walls never lie. Empires fall, thrones crumble. The men who called themselves conquerors are buried in dust. But faith, true faith, the kind that carves itself into stone, survives. The Ottomans built their empire on silence, but these women left a whisper that never died. Because even in the deepest dark, beneath centuries of forgetting, the light still shines.